welcome to this little videotape interview with Wanden Kane and Ruth Hampson. My name is Richard Stamates, and I'd like to thank both of them for granting us the time for this interview. The first question I have is, what is the relationship of Jesus' teachings to the Baha'i Faith?
Would you like to start with that?
I would say that one of the most attractive things about the Baha'i Faith is that it allows an individual to recognize his oneness with all humanity. It broadens one's concept to the point that we no longer can bear prejudices against other peoples who are different in external or superficial ways. So to me, that's one of the greatest things about the Baha'i Faith. Wanden, what about the relationship to Jesus' teachings?
Well, I don't think there is, Baha'u'llah tells us that there are two parts to every messenger's message, and the part number one, the spiritual part, is shared by every single one. There is no difference. The differences come in the second part of the message, with where there is a reason to have divorce or not to have divorce, whether it's wise to eat hog meat or shells, fish. Moses had this problem of taking people through a desert for 40 years, and there was no refrigeration, and hog meat produces trichinosis almost overnight, and shellfish will go bad in a question of hours. So in order not to have everyone ill in the middle of this tremendous march of his, he said it is against the law to eat these two things. But that has nothing to do with the inner message. And what would you say? There really isn't that much difference between the message of Jesus and the message of Baha'u'llah.
I would say that that's so, that the reality of Moses' message was incorporated into Jesus' message, but I also think that it was, the message itself became more deeply spiritual, and that Jesus concentrated upon universal love, and he concentrated upon eternal life, and he brought those up into the minds of men in a way that they had never been before. Mankind was ready to think about those things, and so they were given to us.
But if you think that Moses, after all, no one seems absolutely sure of the date, but roughly somewhere between 1,300 years before Jesus, naturally man had progressed. Some, we hope. And as each one comes, sometimes closer, sometimes longer, but on an average of 1,000 years, you hope that mankind has learned a little something. Jesus, any of these messengers could tell us anything, because they are all knowing. But we could not possibly receive it any more than we could receive any of the things that Baha'u'llah says about the modern inventions or the need for instant communication, and all that wouldn't have made any sense to anybody.
In Jesus' time, it would have been incomprehensible.
And useless.
I think what we're talking about, for one thing, is that mankind is developing spiritually, and that he was always intended from the very beginning to develop spiritually.
Yes.
And if we look back over countless generations and hundreds and thousands of years, we can see that man's understanding of the word brother, for instance, or of the word unity, for instance, we can see that that has always expanded. As every manifestation of God has come, he's given us a broader view of the oneness of humanity.
That's a very good point. Indeed.
So now we've reached this point where we know that the people of the world are one.
And that was one of the messages of Jesus's, was the brothers, St. Peter and St. Paul particularly, was so anxious to get this across, that all men were brothers in Christ. And the more you look at the history of Christianity, the more you realize that St. Paul is is the person who saved it from being a little tiny Jewish sect. Mm-hmm. It would never have been a great world religion if it hadn't been for St. Paul.
Well, what is attractive about the Baha'i Faith?
The most attractive thing for people like that, I would think, is getting away from the guilt. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Oh, I think so too. I think that the elimination of the idea of there being a real live Satan who has tremendous control over my life and over the lives of all people, the dualism that comes from that concept of there being two gods, one God and one Satan.
Satan who becomes a god.
Mm-hmm. Satan becomes a god by fearing him.
Right.
And by believing in him. And so
there you go.
That would be...
It's the belief that creates him.
That's right.
See, there is no such thing. Because he's simply an absence of good. Is what happens to him. But to get rid of him is just wonderful.
It really is.
Okay, so how does the Baha'i Faith deal with that then? I mean, what is it about?
Well, they tell us that there is no such thing as original sin. This was created by the church in order to hold on to the people. Because if the people could feel that there was original sin and that the people must come to them and allow the priests to give them penances and fine them for the sin, then they could keep track of them in more ways than one. They could keep track of their money. They could keep track of what they were doing. And they could keep a pretty good pulse of what the people were thinking if they had to confess every 7 days.
They could also keep them in their particular faith. They could, because the fear of eternal damnation is so terrifying. It is such an enormous burden on the individual that very few individuals would have the courage to step out beyond that. But the Baha'i teachings tells us that the spiritual world is absolutely good and purely luminous. That is to say, that there is no darkness in the life beyond this life, that there is only a progression towards God that's really dependent upon God's mercy to us and upon His having accepted our efforts in this world to become more truly spiritual in our lives. That's a wonderful thing because it gives us individually the opportunity to do and to bear the fruit of whatever we do individually.
And this was told us in early chapters of Genesis. This is what the Garden of Eden story is all about, is the question of free choice. And you are responsible for what you do. And the quicker you learn this, and I think it's a lesson that should be taught all children, do not blame anybody else for what has happened to you. Whatever it is, if you did it, you are responsible for it, and you will have the consequences. You can't push them off on anyone else.
The Baha'i Faith has a passage that tells us that faith itself has been redefined in this day, and it's no longer blind faith. Now it is conscious knowledge plus deeds. It's our really knowing about God, knowing about the manifestation of God, knowing about the spiritual nature of man, and deciding to put that knowledge to work in our own lives in attempting to become finer.
I think that's very well said. Indeed, and something for us all to remember.
The Baha'i Faith is a rather new religion. Is there any problem with that, quote, newness?
Of course, the thing about that is that it is new in one sense, it is not new in another sense. The truth is forever. And one way I think we can assume that the Bible is correct and inspired by God is that no matter what man has done to it, it has survived. It has been translated into just about all languages. It is preserved for all people. And the fact they don't understand it very well, for that the rabbis, the priests, and the ministers are responsible, I think. Don't you?
I think to a degree, either from their lust for power or through ignorance. You know, one or the other.
Yeah.
They've had a tremendous effect and influence upon human beings.
They've had a tremendous amount of both of those things.
Yes, that's true.
Because the strength of whatever church it may be is made up out of how many people. That's why some of the religions are very much against birth control.
That's true. You know, one of the things that a Christian has to deal with is the fact that the return of the Christ Spirit has taken place. That Baha'u'llah is Jesus the Christ in reality, in essence. That they, as Wanden said, they are all one. And this means, for instance, that for 2,000 years Christians have been riding on a train, and their destination is the return of Christ. And they have had a good time on this train. They've, you know, it's had nice places to sleep, and nice places to eat, and they're very comfortable in their life riding on the train. But sooner or later, a train comes to its destination. And once it reaches that destination, a person must disembark in order to experience a new life at the place he was waiting for.
Taking with them my suitcase.
Yes, exactly. It's very easy to fall into a waiting frame of mind.
Yes.
And the method of waiting has become much more important than the actual realization of the fulfillment. But the Baha'is are saying that, in fact, Jesus' message has been fulfilled and that he has returned through the coming of Baha'u'llah. There is a very famous Christian scholar named Teilhard de Chardin who has remarked upon this and said that we Christians must at all cost keep alive the flame of desire for the return of the Christ. And then he goes on to say, we repeat that we know he's coming, but we no longer believe it. And so one of the big tests is, do you really believe that? If you do, you can't afford to refuse to investigate a claim that's so clear as Baha'u'llah's claim is.
But, of course, as the average person takes everything literally, they expect Jesus himself to come to earth in a damp cloud. And it was not its meaning in the least, but you have to understand what cloud means, and to do that you have to read the Egon by Baha'u'llah. That will give you all the clouds you need. But it's absolutely necessary to understand these things symbolically.
Wanden, could you elaborate on the Kitab-i-Egon?
It is the Book of Certitude, which I think should tell you a great deal. And it is, Baha'u'llah in his blessedness has given us the meanings of some of the important words and phrases, like the inner meanings of clouds. And he has given us not one meaning, but he has given us pages and pages of the various meanings of the word cloud. He has given us all sorts of ways to grasp the inner spiritual meanings. Unless you can understand what some of these words are saying, be they Baha'u'llah's or Jesus or Muhammad's, you will come to a dead end, because you can't comprehend, don't you think?
Yes, Abdu'l-Baha has addressed that very point in Some Answered Questions.
Yes.
The book Some Answered Questions, there's one chapter devoted to the use of physical words to convey intellectual thought. there's no way that we can communicate with one another about intangible things without using symbols. Because these things are intangible, we can't even know that another person is thinking about the same thing unless we equate it to a symbol, to a physical something that we can both understand.
We say, I'm heartbroken.
Mm-hmm.
We ourselves use these symbols in every day. I'm sick as a dog, you know. We use these things. We know what we mean by
His
them.
eyes are glued to the television.
That's right, but there isn't any actual glue going from here to there. Precisely.
So, understanding that those words are used in holy books in order to acquaint us with spiritual reality, with spiritual truths, is very, very important. It's necessary for, when we read the Bible, you taught me years ago that it's valuable in many ways. It's a beautiful literature. If one wants to read the Bible as literature, by all means, read it as in its King James Version, for instance, which is so beautiful. And also, if you want to know a bit about the history of the Judaic people, read the Bible and come to understand more about their history. But if you want spiritual understanding, if you want to know what your situation is in regard to Almighty God, if you want to know how the connection is made between human beings and God Almighty, then one must read it with a spiritual eye. We must see that those physical words need to be translated into a spiritual meaning. For instance, oppression. The word oppression that's used. And Baha'u'llah says, what oppression is greater than wishing to know the Word of God and not knowing where to find it? That's why Baha'is are trying to tell people about this wonderful message.
And try to find the people who are searching.
Who really would accept it.
Yes. But it's not up to us whether they do or not. Our business is to tell them about it.
That's right.
How do you think a Baha'i should approach the Bible?
Abdu'l-Baha, in his first address to a Western audience in London, following the address, which was in a church, he wrote in the Bible of that church, on the flyleaf, words to the effect that this book is the holy book of God, of celestial inspiration. He said that that Bible is the mystery of the kingdom and its light. He has really warned us that it's not going to be possible to understand the Bible simply by reading it in a very easy, superficial way. The fact is, I think, that in order to understand many, many passages in the Bible, and the importance of understanding it is evident when we realize we're looking for spiritual truths. The only way to do it is through study, and through prayer, and through the use of Baha'u'llah's teachings. As Wanden mentioned earlier, the Kitab-i-Igan, the Book of Certitude, which was revealed by Baha'u'llah, is a book which stands preeminent in the writings of Baha'u'llah, and the reason that it is so important is because it lays out for the reader the concept of a progress in revelation. It teaches us that all of the great religions are in fact true. When I read in that book that Adam was a messenger of God, I was very excited. Always he had been presented to me as an individual who had caused great grief for the human race. And the idea that he actually was bringing a tremendous message of the right, the responsibility of man to make a choice between good and evil, that was bringing to man's consciousness for the first time the fact that he was responsible for his own actions and that he would pay a price if he violated the teachings of God. That whole idea was a great wonder to me. It's totally different from what I had been taught before. In the book of Genesis, there is a teaching of the development of revelation. It goes, for instance, from Adam, who brought us basic truths, on up to Noah, who taught us the station of a manifestation of God, on to Abraham, who enlarged and widened that sense of unity, and taught us in a way that is still valid today about faith. faithful Abraham gave us a demonstration of the faith one can have to one's God. And that's a development. We went from one thing to another, to a larger concept, and then finally on to Moses. Each one of these individuals, all of whom are mentioned in the book of Genesis, give us the foundation for understanding the gradual evolution of spiritual understanding. And I don't think that we can begin to understand the Bible just through an intellectual desire to do so. I think that we, as Baha'is, have to know, first of all, that we don't know everything, and that the writings of Baha'u'llah contain the seeds which, once we take them in, can develop and become a deeper understanding that doesn't come from any other place. As a Baha'i, the way to understand the Bible is to study Baha'u'llah's teachings about the Bible and to read Abdu'l-Baha's explanations about it. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes prayer. It takes independent thought. And it takes a sense of humility, of a real humility, a desire to know more, and turning to the Word of God to know that more. So I don't think that the Bible is for all Baha'is. After all, there are many people who have become Baha'is who are not at all familiar with the Bible, who don't perhaps even know about Christ's promise to return. The great advantage of having a background in the understanding the spiritual nature of the Bible is the fact that we're then able to relate to people who are Christians, who are Jews, who are searching for more knowledge. And because we have the writings of Baha'u'llah to offer them, we have something to give them. The teachings for this day are in Baha'u'llah's revelation. And we don't really need the Bible, excepting we need it to make communication with people who are still there in their minds. I don't know if that explains what you are asking for, but there's not an easy way. And I do think that it helps tremendously to share. I think that an individual has to be very, very exceptional in order to do this all by themselves. I know people who have done it alone, but you know, when sincere people get together, whether they're Baha'is or not isn't the question. The question is that they're sincere in their search for truth. And once they begin to truly examine and try to translate symbolism into spiritual reality, to study that Bible together, each one feeds the others so that your progress is much faster, usually.
Are there mindsets that one must rid themselves of if they're going to read the Bible?
Oh, yes, I think there are mindsets we have to rid ourselves of. I think we have to rid ourselves of the notion of being absolutely right. Whatever our training may have been, we have to know that it may not be absolutely right. Nobody knows everything. No human being can claim to have complete and total knowledge. It's only God and the manifestation of God who has that power and that understanding. And so when we are taught that our way is right and others are wrong, we are implanting into an individual's mind a barrier that may keep him from independently investigating because of fear, because of a hesitation to move beyond what's familiar and to truly explore with one's own mind. One of the great teachings of Baha'u'llah is the independent investigation of reality, of truth. That is, releasing the chains that keep us believing things that we've never really thought about. You know, so I think that a mindset that allows us to become more reflective and more examining of things is very, very valuable, and also something which allows us to, when we see something that we know is true, to accept it. I think sometimes we're just really reluctant to do that. One of the great moments in my Baha'i life was the time that I've always known that I didn't know very much. I've always been aware of my limitations, great limitations in knowledge. And that impeded me tremendously because it gave me a sense of inability. And one day it occurred to me that since God is all-knowing, and since the manifestation of God is that one who reveals to us all truth, that no other person knows very much either. And the minute I equated myself with everybody else and came to understand that we're all in this same human condition of partial understanding, that I was able then to go ahead and explore for myself and to really grow and develop without barriers. And that's an eternal process. You know, it's very exciting to have your mind opened up so that you can look at something. I can remember a time in studying the faith of Baha'u'llah that I was afraid to put to the test certain ideas because I was afraid that my mind would prove Baha'u'llah wrong. And you asked earlier whether there were any leaps of faith that one has to take. And I do think that is one. I believe that there are many Baha'is who have Christian backgrounds who have little areas that they have never dealt with, that we're training as Christians, that they've never brought to the fore in their Baha'i lives, and that makes them fearful of talking with Christians for fear they'll bring up those very questions that the Baha'i hasn't yet answered in his own mind. And I just want to tell those people that if they study the Kitab-i-Igan and the teachings, the explanations of Abdu'l-Baha, if they explore the Bible with the intent of understanding the spiritual reality, they will find the answers to those very specific questions that they've never dealt with themselves. And they should be encouraged to do that. But it takes an act of faith. You know, it really does. They're just little things. You know, the question, all of the physical things that are to happen to the world, for instance, or whether Jesus is going to come on a cloud when he comes, or whether we need to be baptized. But, you know, that's just a common thing. Do we need to be baptized? Do we need a physical baptism? Well, I think that there are Baha'is who have recognized Baha'u'llah and gone on with the Baha'i Faith, moved into it, but they've never really thought about that question. And so it's sort of in the back of their mind something that they're not sure of. I think they need to take it out and look at it and understand that there's a spiritual answer and that true baptism, in fact, is coming to understand the water of great knowledge, of spiritual knowledge, and that once one is baptized, truly baptized, one has access to that knowledge, and that sprinkling physical water on an individual, whether at birth or later on, and whether it's a sprinkling on or a total immersion, is simply a symbolic act of that other reality. That's just one example. There are lots of things that we Baha'is believe, or we believed and we stopped believing them, but we've not replaced it with a higher understanding.
When we encounter someone from a Christian background, have you found anything that excites their interest, stimulates an interest in the Baha'i Faith?
That is a truly difficult question because it requires great judgment, instant judgment about another individual. And we really never know about another individual. You know, I've known people who are tremendously intellectual, and I have tried to give them books about the Baha'i Faith that were truly intellectual in their approach to the faith, and then maybe work on that for a year or two or three, and suddenly discover that what that individual was thirsting for was a spiritual sense in his life, and that was what was lacking in that intellectual approach to life. And so, you know, you can never be sure, but you do have to make a judgment, and you do the best you can. I think that the teachings, some of the major teachings of Baha'u'llah that deal with the harmony between science and religion, for instance, and the absolute need for that harmony, and the recognition that there can't be a dichotomy between science, which is an examination of God's creation, and religion, which is an expression or a reception of God's will on earth. You know, that there cannot be any difficulty between those two. And so if an individual were scientific, I might think maybe that's a good way to speak to that individual, to spark his curiosity. Or if it were an individual who was from another country, or maybe who had a world view, a slightly developed world view, I would want to talk about the need for a person's vision to be world embracing rather than confined to his own self. Or if it were a person who were not too sure about Christianity, I don't think that I would try to persuade an individual who hadn't shown a great conviction about the prophecies in the Bible, for instance. I don't think that I would immediately pour upon him all the proofs of prophecy that Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha have given us, because he has to believe in the beginning of things in order to accept the answer to them. Do you see? So it's just really difficult, but it requires a very thoughtful examination of a person to find out what it is uppermost in their minds right then, try to link that to a teaching of Baha'u'llah, and try to present that teaching in a way that they would find palatable or not too far away from where they are in their thinking themselves. There are a lot of people nowadays who believe almost all of the great principles of Baha'u'llah. You know, they believe in the need for an auxiliary world language. It's become very evident that we have to have it. They believe in the equality of men and women. You know, they know that there's no difference, that they were both created by God, and that there's not a difference that puts man at the head of the household and woman 2 or 3 steps below, or any steps below. That there are a lot of people who give lip service to many of these truly spiritual principles, who have not yet translated them into their lives, and especially into their collective lives, in the boardrooms or in industry or wherever they happen to be living the greater part of their lives. They may give lip service to these concepts in their church or in their family life, but not have found the way to translate that into their larger collective life with humanity. And I think that's a very important step that Baha'u'llah has given us. You know, he's taken religion out of, he's allowed it to become enlarged so that there's nothing in the world any longer that's not the business of God. Now, we can no longer separate the profane from the purely, truly religious. And I think in the past that's been a characteristic of religions. I remember years ago people would say, well, you have to be practical. You know, if we ask a question about, well, why do we do this in business? You know, doesn't Jesus the Christ teach this? And they would say, well, we have to be practical. You know, there are times when you can't use this principle because you're living in the real world. Well, I think Baha'u'llah has turned that around. You know, and he's telling us that until we do translate all of those spiritual understandings that we mouth, until we translate those into our lives, and until society collectively translates them into their actions and into their interrelationships, we're going to have war. We're going to have prejudice against different kinds of people. I think there are a lot of people who are receptive to those ideas now because they see how close we are to total destruction from the other path which we have followed.
Do you have any idea what might keep someone from making a commitment to the Baha'i Faith?
I think that's between them and God. You know, as Wanden said earlier, our business is to tell people about the faith of Baha'u'llah and to make it possible for them to investigate it to the extent that they want to. And after that, they make the decision. And I have no idea. I know that I myself took several years to come to accept Baha'u'llah. And it was only after I had really hammered at it from every angle I could think of and had been totally unsuccessful in proving it wrong. I did, though, recognize the implications of the claim at the very beginning. When I heard that Baha'u'llah claimed to be the return of Christ, the implications of it were so evident to me that, you know, it was mind exploding. And then reality set in. And I came to think, oh, that's not possible. In this world of corrupted people, such a wonderful thing couldn't be true. So I guess it's what Horace Holly used to call the spirit of unfaith. You know, we have to help people to eliminate that spirit of unfaith, that inability to believe. It's scary to believe. You know, you have to give up that little corner you're hiding in and say, I believe. That's a big thing to do. But what causes a person to do it or not to do it, I don't know. I spent a couple of years learning how to study and learning that I had certain intellectual capacity, not much, but some that was mine and that I was free to use. And I did all that. I did all the research. I examined the prophecies and I studied the this and the that, and I figured out encyclopedias and went off in many tangents in exploring this. But what really persuaded me in the end was someone gave me the 7 Valleys and 4 Valleys and said that I should read that. You know, if I was thinking about being a Baha'i, I should read that book. And so I read it, and I opened it and began reading and never stopped until I reached the end. I just stood and read page after page after page, and I knew that it was true. I did not know intellectually that it was true. I hadn't the faintest idea of what it was saying. All I knew was that it was the Word of God. And when I finished it, then there was no doubt in my mind at all that Baha'u'llah was the manifestation of God. So I don't know how that works into my intellectual examination. You know, I really, you know, every individual is different. And we don't know how another individual is. We just know, you know how you are, and I know how I am, and my responsibility is clear. It's how I handle myself and what I do with what I know.
Wanden, would you share with us one of your favorite passages from the Bible?
Jesus answered, by the way, this is the Gospel of St. John in chapter 3, verse 11. And Jesus is speaking to Nicodemus. Verily, verily, I say unto thee, we speak that which we do know, and testify that which we have seen, and ye receive not our witness. If I have told you earthly things, and ye believe not, how shall ye believe if I tell you of heavenly things? And no man hath ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man, which is in heaven. Now, this doesn't make any sense at all from an ordinary standpoint. But one of the things that Baha'u'llah tells us that took me a great many years to grasp at all was the fact that the messengers of God are pre-existent. That is, that they come from heaven, or however you want to say it, in a human form, in order that we can make contact with them. The great, powerful, creative force that we mean by God, Baha'u'llah says that is nothing that we are to search for. It is beyond us. But the fact that the messengers are sent to earth in the human form means that we can make contact with them. But I found this awfully difficult to understand, this business that they were pre-existent. And then I got to thinking, well, it's just like the theater. The curtains part, and you see the person who is the prince or the king or something, and in a little while the curtain closes and the actor goes away, but the character of the actor and the part that he plays stays with you. And if it weren't for translating the Holy Spirit into the physical form, we would not be able to make any contact whatever. because you have to have a receiver, you have to have a television machine to pick up the pictures and the words that are coming over with it. Did you have any trouble, Toby, picking this up about the pre-existent?
No, I didn't. It was totally real to me the first time I read it.
Really?
Yes. I had trouble with lots of things, but I never had believed in Jesus, the Christ, in a way that would have placed any clouds in my mind, because I had always wondered who he was. I had always wondered about Jesus. I had not come to the point of accepting him as the Son of God until after I became a Baha'i.
Yeah. Well, I think this happens to a great many of us. Yeah, I agree to that. And this, you see, was there were a good many people that understood this, but I think the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost here is what they were talking about, and they understood it. But nobody else did. The ordinary people didn't. They had not.
Maybe.
Yes, I think this is your real Trinity. And you have to have a Trinity to go forward, which is interesting, because you have to have a father and mother to have a child. Everything is based on threes.
And then you have to have the giver and the receiver and the gift.
And the gift. And you have to have, like the television, you have to have the electricity going through these things to produce the end result.
And you also have to have the sun and the earth, and you have to have the rays of the sun that serve to connect the two.
Exactly. Without the rays of the sun, everything would die, and there would be no life.
Right.
Now, and as with that, will you read this beginning of St. John, which is one of the greatest things ever written?
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth not. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. The same came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all men through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth.
Now that says it all, and is one of the most gorgeous things, and something you could spend a couple of years on.
There's a passage here in the Hidden Words, in the Kitab-i-Iqan, the Book of Certitude.
Oh, let's have that.
All right. This is a quote from the Bible that Baha'u'llah is using. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man, coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Unquote. These words signify that in those days men will lament the loss of the sun of the divine beauty, of the moon of knowledge, and of the stars of divine wisdom. Thereupon they will behold the countenance of the promised one, the adored beauty, descending from heaven and riding upon the clouds. By this is meant that the divine beauty will be made manifest from the heaven of the will of God, and will appear in the form of the human temple. The term heaven denoteth loftiness and exaltation, inasmuch as it is the seat of the revelation of these manifestations of holiness, the daysprings of ancient glory. These ancient beings, though delivered from the womb of their mother, have in reality descended from the heaven of the will of God. Though they be dwelling on this earth, yet their true habitations are the retreats of glory in the realms above. Whilst walking among mortals, they soar in the heaven of the divine presence. Without feet, they tread the path of the Spirit, and without wings they rise unto the exalted heights of divine unity. With every fleeting breath, they cover the immensity of space, and at every moment traverse the kingdoms of the visible and in the invisible. Upon their thrones is written, "Nothing whatsoever keepeth him from being occupied with any other thing." And on their seats is inscribed, verily, his ways differ every day. They are sent forth through the transcendent power of the Ancient of Days, and are raised up by the exalted will of God, the most mighty King. This is what is meant by the words, "coming in the clouds of heaven."
Isn't that marvelous?
It's beautiful.
I'd like to take the time to thank both Wanden and Ruth for taking the time to give us share some of their knowledge with us about the Baha'i Faith. And I hope that those of you who are watching the videotape have learned something and enjoyed it. And thank you.